Hey everyone, welcome to the Authentic Work Show, our live stream and podcast all about building online businesses. Each week, I'll be interviewing independent business owners, creators, side hustlers, and talking about cool tools out there to help everyone profit from their passions. In this series, I'll be chatting with business owners, exploring platforms, and having interesting conversations all about building that online business or side hustle with purpose and authenticity. Today, I'd love to welcome Kimberly Erwin. Kimberly is an author, a media executive, an owner, higher education administrator, and professor teaching English and ethnic communication and diversity awareness. She aids others in entrepreneurial endeavors designed to unite communities across the globe. Kimberly has lived and worked abroad in Europe, Mexico, and the Caribbean. She described herself as being passionate all about life's diversity, people, languages, and places. Kimberly, thank you so much for coming and welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd love to start by you telling your story about how life changed when COVID happened. What it set the stage in terms of what it is that you were doing?
Well, in February, so this was still the time of COVID-19, but it really didn't hit New York at that time. We were just still trying to figure it out and basically thought that it would go away. So when we had our standing room only book launch for the book that I've written, There's Only One Race, The Human Race Says Me, a children's book ending racism. So many people came out for that. There's a lot of students that took part in the book, and we just thought we would go from a great launch into a in-person event structure. Mm-hmm. So Hudson Children's Book Festival is in the town that I grew up in, which is where I currently live and where I wrote the book and have my business. So I just thought it'd be great to have the second largest children's book festival part of my platform to sell the book and to jumpstart any other types of products that my company would be selling. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen because of COVID-19. So I think I was more pessimistic about it than the people around me, because I know the people who put the festival together and they were still holding out hope for it, but not me. I went into my cocoon of possible technology to see what I could do to be more helpful and fruitful in getting my book to the masses, so to speak. And when I went in, I found a few things. Not a lot was available, but I saw a platform that I had purchased earlier in 2019. And I thought, hey, maybe that could be helpful. And it was called Hey Summit. So I took a look at Hey Summit and found avenues that I could use. I had to go and get a webinar platform to be useful. So in doing that, I'm a very good researcher as an academician. Anything I need to look for, anything I need to do, I'm going to research it before. So I looked at all the different types of devices and I could use with it. And I kind of settled on Zoom, but there was another product like Live Webinar that was really in tune with Hey Summit at the time. So I thought maybe I'll use this platform and go forward. And I think that answered the question. So,
no, it was just it was more about
again,
how
I can go on.
I know. Don't worry. I'm just fascinated about like what prompted you to think, not specifically about Hey Summit or necessarily what you used, but you were going to do this book launch and then COVID happened and you decided to figure out another way versus just say, you know what, I'll just chill. So what kind of went into that kind of decision? Like what prompted you to think, no, that there must be another way to get the word out?
Well, I think entrepreneurs, we have a spirit of can do. So if someone says you can't do this, we find a way that we can do. Mm-hmm. And again, so I decided if I can't do it in person, I'm going to do it virtually. And having the technology, the SaaS products available, I trained myself in getting that done and then brought other people on board because I didn't know how to do it just by myself, or I'm very much of a giver backer to the community. And I saw that my community About 3 weeks later, after I thought what I'm going to do for my own self, I saw my community struggling with COVID-19. I had students that I was in the school system with. In fact, the very last day of school closings, I was actually in the junior high school. A friend that I had graduated school with, she taught a class, and she asked if I could substitute her class for her because she wouldn't be in that day. She didn't think it was going to be the last day, of course, but that ended up being the very last day. I remember one student saying, "Hey, I'm not going to have to get all my things out of my locker because it's just going to be until the end of vacation." They had the spring break vacation coming up a week later, so they just basically told them it was going to be like that. But I had forethought, and I said, "I don't think so. Go to your locker, get everything out, because your parents are not going to want to come back to school just to take the things out of your locker, and you may not come back for the rest of the school season." And some students like that, they listened to me, and other people, they didn't want to do their homework at home, so they decided to leave it on the locker. But I say all that to say, I saw that these students that I was familiar with, and the teachers that I'm familiar with, being an academician and having gone to school in Hudson, they were at home for about 3 weeks in April, not really feeling comfortable about their existence. You know, they thought they'd be back in school. They thought life would be normal, and now it's not. And so I thought to gather other leaders in the community together, other creatives, other entrepreneurs like myself who are solo entrepreneurs, and try to build a community of online people to help those offline. And so I worked together. We had a summit, and through that, I found that each of these niches, whether they were an entrepreneur themselves or whether they were creatives, you know, they had books to sell or products to offer, or they were people in organizations that helped others, but, you know, they're event structured, like a librarian who, you know, people go to the library, they get services at the library. Now she was tasked with, how do I still service my community, not in person? And so since I had done so much research, I thought I had a lot of knowledge. And so I can switch my focus to not just selling my book through Intercultural Connect books online, but to also share the knowledge that I have and service those individuals with helping them get online digitally with their webinars, websites. I mean, by then I probably had watched 80 webinars, several training sites. You know, every product, they have people who are well-versed in it, and you can find them on YouTube. So I had all this wealth of knowledge, ways to simulcast your social media information all at the same time, so you don't have to go in and plug it. So all of these different things that I think that the average person didn't really learn at that time. And they knew me. And these are people who are cost conscious. So they're not going to go out to the professional who's been doing it for 6 years. You know, they really wanted to find a way they can do it effectively, but with a cost effective or a price point that they can deal with too, because money wasn't coming in. They're sitting at home. Some of them don't have their second jobs or their first jobs. So it was really important that I service the community while servicing myself. It's like we each helped each other.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it's tough though to take on all of that, you know, added expectation, I guess, when you're also, you know, an entrepreneur in your own right. You know, you have a business to run, right? You have a book to peddle, right? And share. So it's just interesting how entrepreneurs have a habit of making more work for themselves just because it seems like the right thing to do. Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the book and what it's about and why you wrote it and who you wrote it for.
Okay, well, this book is the children's book, and I think I even said the title wrong because that wasn't my original title. It takes a village to create a masterpiece. So this masterpiece was forwarded because of, well, I'll take you a little bit back. 14 years ago, I started writing and researching a book on race and ethnicity to help students that I had, but I left the institution. So I was the Multicultural Student Affairs Director at Skidmore College in upstate New York.
Mhm.
And as the Multicultural Student Affairs, we have a group called Alana, which is Asian American, Latino American, African American, and Native American groups. And it also incorporated other groups like Muslims, whichever group needed aid to feel comfortable on a campus that was a predominantly white institution. I think 99.9% of the students didn't have any financial aid. And at that time, and this is like 14 years ago, college tuition was about $36,000. So I can only imagine what it is now. But so for just a small portion of those students, they were coming up from New York City and they weren't very comfortable in their environment. So they went from a mega city environment like New York City, where they're coming from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, where there's diversity everywhere, where everyone is diverse. So to a place where there are mostly very few that look like them or have their experience and their cultural understanding and beliefs and belief system. So they were feeling comfortable being at the school until everyone else showed up on campus. And so here I am, my first year there, and I thought I would share the knowledge that they needed to have, because I had students coming to me saying to me, Miss Erwin, I had no idea what Cubano meant, or I had no idea if I should not like to be called Hispanic, or should I be called Latino. I had one Asian American student, who sat in my office one morning and looked at me and said, I went to the ACA Asian Cultural Awareness meeting and I had no idea that I was Asian. And I said to myself and everyone else later, I said, I kind of knew that as soon as he walked in the door, because he was a young person who was adopted from China as a baby. So his features were very much Chinese descent and heritage, but he didn't have the heritage. His American family never really chatted and shared his cultural background with him from his original parents, his birth parents. So here I am armed with all these people, but they're used to just celebrating the heritage months. You know, February is African American month and Hispanic month, but they didn't have the core of how they can persevere and strive and go forward in an academic environment that people didn't look like them. So I started that 14 years ago, and now I was 2 chapters shy of completing the full manuscript. And I'm in this system in Hudson, New York, where the majority of the students used to be white, and now they've switched to a lot of the students coming from Bangladesh. And the Bangladeshi, being newly immigrants, they weren't familiar with the race and ethnicity cultural stigma or dichotomy that we have, white and black in America. And I heard a lot of things coming from some of the students, and that made other students uncomfortable. So I said the best way to make everyone comfortable is to give them some knowledge, give them some education. And when I talked to teachers, they felt uncomfortable sharing certain things with them. I had one librarian who said she actually had a book that talked about Black hair, and she read it to the students, and she felt that, you know, she can get feedback. A good way to read is to ask questions as you're reading the book to young people. And she was asking questions and they weren't answering her. And there was a lot of reasons for why that might have occurred. I wasn't there, but when I shared with her some of it, she went, ah. So I said, okay, this book needs to be a book that satisfies the knowledge that young people need, but to be in a way that can be provided to them by adults, by their parents, by their teachers. And so that's how I formulated the book. I just used the 3 known research facts in my adult book, and I just transferred it to the young people. First step is to know yourself. Second step is to know the history of how we got to where we are in America with this race and ethnicity confusion. And then how to go about solving it. What are your actions to go forth? Because just knowing about it isn't good enough. So yeah, armed with a few poems, and I had a teacher who was my actual kindergarten teacher as an editor, because I'm not really a children's book writer. That's just something that I did because I could, and I saw that I needed to help those others young people too. And so that's how it came about. And I published it through Intercultural Connect Books because I had another book that was already published by Intercultural Connect Books. And we had a hiatus on that. And I thought, well, since we didn't do another book with some other poems, because it was a book of poetry and it was supposed to be a lot of people who do slam poetry getting their slam poetry into the book, into books, into text, and then to be able to go forth and sell their books. If people just don't, people weren't buying CDs because of, the technology, but to have something physical in hand when they go and do their slam poetry. That was kind of the idea. And so I had this availability of time and space with the company. And so that's why I put it forward the way I did.
So you say you have the ability of time and space. And I think looking at your bio and reading more about you, it's very surprising that you might have the time and space. But I think if someone was trying to describe you, it'd be tough to pin you down, right? But throughout, whether it's in academia, as an author, as a trainer, as a consultant, whatever it is, you do go back to that word entrepreneur, and I'd love to drill into that a little bit, because the life of an entrepreneur, the life of someone who builds things themselves, can sometimes be quite lonely. And I know that I love talking about this a lot, but when it is just you, and when there is a lot of self-driven motivation, and you don't necessarily have a team around you that can help, that motivation is sometimes tough. And so how do you manage that? What motivates you? How do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to say I always have a team. They're just not always engaged with what I'm engaged with, because like you say, I do a lot of things. So my motivation really is that. I liken back to what, or I harken back to what Oprah, I think Oprah said it, she says so much, so maybe she would say somebody else. But she says, if you enjoy what you're doing, it's never work. And that if you do it, the resources will come. So a lot of people do work. I mean, they go to work to get the financial resources. And in doing so, they may sit in an office with a lot of people, but they're not really communicating because maybe they don't want to be there. So I'm usually in a space where I want to be. And if I'm not, I get there quickly, as you can tell. But so in that time when I'm, between, when people aren't really vibing with me because I'm already moving on to something else, I find you can't really do it anymore, but I used to join the networks where you go to, I think they call them we offices. I'm not sure what they're called, but when you're a member of an office group, and then you can go and there's coffee and light music, and you have your office, or you have your desk, or even a table that you set up. And when I started, I think it was in Orlando, when I was in Orlando teaching English as a teacher, where I retired from that. And that's where I started. I said, I need an office to get things done, to move forward, because OneUniversal Media was that first. It was One World Publications. And so before that, so I got that off the ground, and it had to change to OneUniversal Media because of when I went to go get a domain, it wasn't available. And so I didn't have a lot of money, or didn't earn a lot of money through One World Publications, because now all these things like ISSU was coming out. But so I focused on that. And then the coffee shops, right? And then when I came up to Hudson, a lot of the Hudson vibe is not very business oriented. It's more people on vacation. And so I'm around people who are not really working. They're enjoying life. And I think for me, it's then, again, now going online, I meet other people like me who are interested in doing like things that I do. And we have conversations in that manner. But it can get really, really lonely. But I think the motivation is what keep you from tiring out.
And And
you're working for yourself, so you get to decide when you want to take a break and read a book or go for a jog or rollerblade. You can do that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, that if you do kind of feel that it is lonely, as you say, your team is who you define your team as, in a way. So, surrounding yourself with the right kind of people is just as important as deciding what it is that you want to do and how you want to spend your time.
Yes.
So this has been super interesting, and thank you very much. There's one kind of final question that I'd love to ask, and that's around, frankly, I'm just being nosy. What kind of tools, what kind of processes do you use on a daily basis to keep yourself organized? Do you like any particular ways of working? Do you work with pen and paper? Do you have apps that you really like? What's your work stack?
As a teacher, we do show and tell. Paper, pen, iPad, cell phone. I use them all because I'm a creature of the pen and paper. And as a writer, author, whatever you started doing, you kind of enjoy that process more. Yeah. But so I'm used to the word processor, but then I had to get away from that and get to the computers, right? So I'm really good at going with the flow. Mm-hmm. So when I find, and that's a problem sometimes because
use a lot of things.
I use a lot of things. And so again, all these things I use just for meeting with you. I use the pen and paper. I had text and notes on my iPad. But it's also great in a sense because when I show my age a little bit, initially word processing, okay, you can't, if you're writing something, you can't get rid of a word processor in some form or fashion. And Microsoft Word and WordPerfect, units were the key. But now, and Apple has their own, which I kind of use Apple, I have to admit, since I have a Mac, I use Apple products. And they're getting better. They're getting updated. But Google right now, Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google everything. You can make your own app off of Google documents and sheets and things, and then it can be easily sent to people. So I'm kind of narrowing it down to maybe more of the Google Docs. But I use, and I don't know if I can name drop, but I'm a big AppSumo fan. I wouldn't technically call myself an AppSumoling because I don't like to join and be part of groups. But I do go there because a lot of new entries are going there and they're basing their new products off of those that work in the marketplace already. And they're building new bridges, what they see is needed and at an economical cost point. So as a person who is, vying into different avenues, and right now I use Drift to get my certificate actually in digital marketing and social media planning because of how they look at customer service. And so I really engaged in that. And I did that without even buying the product. So sometimes you can do that. So I kind of I like to use the newest thing out, but I use methods from what I know. So, people right now I have a friend who's on Instagram and she said, you should send everything on Instagram. But I'm a Facebook kind of a person, and I tweet a little bit because it's easier to send. But now with the marketing software I have where you can just, create something and then send it to all the platforms at once, I can be everywhere. So I can satisfy all of my friends and fans at the same time. And that's what I'm utilizing. So I guess the idea is I like planning facilities. I like using Infinity.io. I use for working with some of the teams that I have because then they can get on and write what they need to write. I love any new product that allows team members to go in and access the product. Like I did an advertisement with Blixier, and that's because you can have team members go right in and change your video, whatever whatever you're doing, they can go in and make it better. And especially with me, when I use, I have 3 members that I see as a team. but after, sometimes they're busy and I don't really have employees where I'm paying them on, a regular basis. And so if I see that they're busy, then I might need to go outside and utilize staff that I find online. And you don't really want them always in your realm. So a lot of these new apps allow them to go in and just work on that one project, as opposed to maybe projects you're working on with others. From the summit that I had, I received 3 clients, and they're doing 3 different things. One's doing podcasting, one is doing training for her, what is it called? Selling homes, home selling. And another is a creative who wants to have their own website and make it look more creative instead of business-like. And they had one from 1985 or something like that. Before websites were really anything. So they needed just to upgrade it a little, and they didn't want to do the research. So, so I like to use the newest. Lots
of things.
Yeah.
Give it a go. So getting back to the fundamentals with your writing, but you're always up for trying the latest and greatest.
Well, even so, I think to blend them too, because I just started a radio show. I'm a co-host of the WGXC is it 90.7 FM, and just Tuesday we had our first show as a co-host. I was on a couple of times selling my book and being a leader in the community, but I just think if you can do it and it really can segue into creating more buzz, or just being able to supply more services to different people when you're in the know with more things.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping on top of the pulse.
There you go.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming on and for joining us today. It's been really great to kind of get a piece of what it is that you're doing and learn a bit more about the book. If anybody would like to connect with Kimberly, you can find her on Twitter at Kimberly.Erwin. She's also on Facebook, as she said, or you can check out OneUniversalMedia.com. So thanks again, Kimberly, and have a fantastic week, everyone. And wherever you are in the world, I hope that you're all staying safe and keeping well. I'll see you next week. Thanks.